Roberto Paredes walked into the River Street Coffee House on December 22nd believing he was meeting a potential donor for his late mother's charity. The air was thick with the scent of roasted beans and cinnamon, a soundtrack of cheerful carols at odds with the dread tightening his chest. Then he saw her. In the corner booth, a woman in a worn winter coat. A single, small mitten was clipped to her purse strap. She looked up as he approached, her eyes holding a depth of weariness and resolve that stopped him cold. Before he could speak, she said 5 words that pierced the armor he'd worn for 2 years. "Your mother asked me here." The world tilted. This was no donor meeting. This was a setup. And what happened next would leave the most feared man in Newark crying in front of strangers 3 days before Christmas. To understand why, you had to understand his mornings. Dawn in a penthouse of cold marble and imported silence. Waking was not a beginning, but a resumption of a sentence. Roberto moved through the rituals mechanically. The custom suit, the Italian shoes, the gold watch that weighed like a manacle. Downstairs, his security detail waited, a monument to the empire he'd built and now inhabited like a ghost. His second-in-command, Vicente, met him at a waterfront warehouse in Newark at 6:45 a.m. "Morning, boss." A nod was the only reply Roberto could muster. Work was his anesthetic. In the ledgers of shipping manifests and the calculus of territory, he could outrun the memories. For 730 days, since the morning his mother's hand went still in his, this had been his survival. Not living. Enduring. His phone rang near noon as he sat in the back of his Mercedes, picking at tasteless takeout.
Luca.
His younger brother. Roberto almost let it go to voicemail. Luca was the keeper of a conscience Roberto had buried, a living reminder of promises made in a hospice room. "What is it, Luca? Remember Mama's Christmas food fund? For the single parents in Newark?" Roberto's jaw tightened. Of course he remembered. The fragile grip of her hand, her voice a thin thread of sound. "Asterisco pramisme, mi hijo." Let my name mean something good. Asterisk. I remember. I found a major donor. Someone who knew Mama. She wants to meet you. Get a sense of the vision. Excuses lined up on his tongue. Territory disputes, the pushing Colombians. But they were just barricades against the pain of speaking about her to a stranger. "It's just coffee, Roberto. 1 hour. Mama would want this." Guilt, his oldest motivator, sealed it.
Fine.
When and where? 7 tonight. River Street Coffee House. Her name's Mia. Roberto hung up, adding it to the day's ledger of obligations. What he didn't know was that Luca had already made another call. Across town, Mia Zucks finished her shift at ShopRite, her body aching with a fatigue that went deeper than bones. In her beat-up Honda, she calculated numbers that never quite balanced: groceries, rent, Levi's school supplies. The phone rang with an unknown number.
Mia.
"It's Luca. I need your help." Her blood ran cold. What kind of help? "It's about Roberto." Then it's a no. "It's not business. It's not dangerous. It's about your promise to our mother." The air left Mia's lungs. 2 years vanished in a heartbeat. The quiet hospice room. The scent of medicine and lavender. The formidable yet fading woman who had, in the darkest watches of the night, become her confidant. Roberto's mother had called her "mi luz," my light. In those final weeks, she had extracted a promise, placing a sealed envelope into Mia's hands. Asterisk, wait 2 years. Give this to my Roberto at Christmas time. He won't be ready before. Asterisk. Mia. Luca's voice was soft, urgent. He hasn't lived since she died. He needs to hear what Mama left for him. But he won't meet you unless he thinks it's business. This sounds like a blind date, she whispered, her eyes falling on her son's worn backpack. It is, Luca admitted, no trace of apology. But he needs you. Mama chose you for a reason. Mia thought of the envelope, kept in her top drawer, a sacred weight. She thought of the stories the old woman had told, of a boy with a protector's heart, long before the world hardened it.
Okay, Mia breathe.
But I tell him the truth the second he sits down. Roberto arrived at 6:55 p.m., scanning for a woman who matched the donor in his mind. Polished, poised, prosperous.
He found Mia.
The worn coat, the tired, kind eyes, the child's mitten.
Mia?
I'm Roberto Pareddes. She looked up, and he saw not the recognition of a business associate, but something more intimate, more unsettling.
Yes.
Please sit. He slid into the booth, his professional mask firmly in place. Luca mentioned you're interested in my mother's Christmas fund. Confusion washed over her features. Christmas fund? He told me you had questions, that you needed to talk to someone who was there at the end. There at the end? The words felt like ice in his veins. I was her hospice nurse. The last 6 weeks. Betrayal, hot and sharp, lanced through him. He stood abruptly, the chair screeching. Every head turned. This is a setup. The words were a low growl, barely contained. He grabbed his coat, the walls of the cozy cafe suddenly suffocating. I'm sorry, Mia stood, her face pale. I didn't know he lied. If I'd known. It's not your fault. He was already turning, a storm contained in a suit. Roberto, wait. Her voice, clear and firm, stopped him at the door. Your mother chose me. He froze, his back to her, hand clenched on the handle. Mia's next words were softer, meant only for him. She made me promise something before she died. I've been carrying it for 2 years. Slowly he turned. The cafe had faded into a blur. All he could see was Mia reaching into her purse and pulling out a sealed envelope. She placed it gently on the table. Roberto's breath hitched. The handwriting on the front was shaky, but unmistakable. A relic from a lost world. Asterisco Paredes Roberto, mi hijo. He walked back as if in a trance, sinking into the booth. His fingers, which could sign death warrants without a tremor, shook as he reached for it. She gave that to me the night before she passed, Mia whispered. She made me promise to wait. 2 years to the week. I can't, he rasped, eyes burning. Not here. Just read the first line. Mia urged gently. She said you'd need to know it was real. With a final, ragged breath, he broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The first line was a grenade in his soul. Asterisco si estás leyendo esto, mi hijo, entonces el mundo no te destruyó. Asterisk. If you are reading this, my son, then the world did not destroy you. A sound escaped him, a raw, shattered thing, torn from a place he thought had died. He covered his face, but the tears came anyway, hot and relentless, carving tracks through the facade of the unbreakable man. His shoulders shook with the force of 2 years of suppressed grief.
Mia waited.
She didn't offer empty comfort, just a steady presence across the table. When he could finally look up, vision blurred, he found her own eyes glistening. She talked about you every night, Mia said, while I brushed her hair. Stories of you bringing her dandelions from the neighbor's yard. Of teaching you to make empanadas, flour everywhere. How you fought 3 bullies for a smaller kid and came home proud, not of winning, but of doing what was right. Each memory was a key turning in a long-locked chamber of his heart. She sang to you, Mia continued. Old Spanish lullabies. She'd say, maybe he'll hear it in his dreams and remember his way home. She prayed, Roberto. Not for you to leave your life. She knew that ask was too big, but for your heart to remember its way back to the light. The waitress brought tissues and water, her kindness a silent acknowledgement of the monumental breaking happening in her cafe. Why you? Roberto finally managed, his voice gravel. Why did she give this to you? Mia looked down at her hands, at the small, silver ring that was her own mother's. I think because I understood surviving. My son's father left before Levi was born. I've worked 3 jobs since. Days at ShopRite, nights cleaning offices, hospice shifts when I could. Your mother saw me tired. She saw me scared, but she said I had a fighter's spirit. She called me her light in the dark. Mia met his gaze. Maybe she thought I could be a flicker for you, too. Roberto studied her. The resilience in her posture, the honesty in her weary eyes. He saw no pity, only a shared understanding of carrying weight. The letter, he said, touching the paper. Is it just this? Mia shook her head. There's more in there. But she also gave me instructions, separate from the letter, about what she wanted you to do. A cold dread mixed with a desperate curiosity. What instructions? She wanted you to reclaim Christmas. Not just go through the motions. To reclaim the joy of it. She knew you'd buried it with her. He flinched. It was true. The very thought of carols, of decorations, of tamales steaming in the kitchen, was a physical pain. He'd outlawed Christmas in his homes, in his businesses. He'd spent the last 2 Decemberants in a haze of work and whiskey, treating the season like a wound to be ignored. I can't, he whispered. She believed you could, Mia said. And she was specific. She didn't just want you to have a party. She wanted you to finish what she started. The Christmas fund.
But to do it hands-on. To see the families.
To remember what the Paredes name could mean. The door chimed, and a small boy with a backpack too big for him burst in, his face lighting up when he saw Mia.
Mom.
I finished He skidded to a halt, his bright eyes landing on Roberto, taking in the suit, the intensity, the traces of tears. The boy's smile vanished, replaced by a careful, wary politeness.
Oh.
Sorry, sir. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Sir.
The word was a bucket of ice water. In that child's eyes, Roberto saw not a man grieving his mother, but a figure of authority and fear. A boss. It was the reflection he'd avoided for years. It's okay, Levi, Mia said softly. This is Mr. Paredes. He was a friend of Grandma Anna's. Levi nodded, but the wariness remained. Hello, Mr. Paredes. Roberto found his voice, straining to soften its edges. Hello, Levi. He looked at Mia. I should go. I need to process this. She nodded. Keep the letter. Read the rest when you're ready. He stood, carefully folding the precious pages into his inner pocket. As he passed Levi, he paused, an impulse seizing him. He reached into his wallet, not for money, but for a small, old St. Christopher medal his mother had given him when he got his first car. He pressed it into the boy's hand. For safe travels, he said, his voice rough. Levi looked at the medal, then up at him, confusion and a dawning awe in his eyes. Thank you, sir. Roberto just nodded and walked out into the cold Newark night, the letter burning a hole over his heart. The penthouse had never felt emptier. Roberto poured a drink, but didn't drink it. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, the city lights twinkling like indifferent stars. Finally, he sat in the dark and took out the letter. He read the first line again. Then, drawing a breath that felt like his first in years, he read on. My dearest Roberto, if you are reading beyond the first line, then you are finally ready to hear the rest. And my soul, wherever it is singing. I am so proud of you. Not for the empire you built, though your mind amazes me, or the respect you command, though it breaks my heart how you earned it. I am proud because your heart still beats. You survived the unthinkable. You survived losing me. A mother knows this is the hardest fight her child will ever face. Asterisk. Asterisk now, I have one final request. The most important one. Asterisk. I want you to love again. Asterisk. Not someday. Not when you think you've paid enough penance for the life you lead.
Now. Today.
Grief is not loyalty, mi hijo. Joy is loyalty. Happiness is the greatest rebellion against the darkness that took me, and the darkness you sometimes choose. Asterisk. Asterisk, I have taken the liberty of choosing someone for you to practice on. Mia, the woman who gave you this letter. Do not be angry with her or with Luca. This was my design. I studied her in those long nights. She has a heart that understands loss but has not been conquered by it. She has a strength that is quiet, like the deep roots of an oak. She has a son who looks at the world with a kindness it does not deserve, and who needs a father figure who knows, in his bones, how to protect what is precious. Asterisk. Asterisk, you do not have to marry her. You only have to let her in. Let her see the man I see when I close my eyes, not the boss, but the boy who brought me flowers. Let her son remind you of wonder. Asterisk. Asterisk, finish the Christmas fund. but do it with them. See it through their eyes. Feed the families, clothe the children, but let them feed your soul in return. Asterisk. Asterisk, this life you built, it is a fortress. But a fortress is also a prison. You have spent years keeping danger out. Now, I am begging you from beyond. Let some light in. Asterisk. The greatest act of honoring the dead, my son, is refusing to join them while you are still breathing. Asterisk, love wildly. Live fully. Remember your joy. Asterisk. All my love, now and forever.
Mama.
Roberto read it 3 times. Then he sat in the silent dark, the pages damp in his hands, and wept until he was hollowed out. And in that hollow space, something new, something fragile, began to take root. He called Mia the next morning. Can you meet? I read it. All of it. And I want to do it. What she asked. They met at the same coffee shop, but the dynamic had shifted. The air was charged not with betrayal, but with a daunting potential. I want to fund the Christmas project fully, Roberto said, his business persona settling around him like a familiar, if uncomfortable, coat. But I don't want to just write a check. I want to build it. To make it sustainable. With you.
Mia blinked.
With me? You know what these families need. I know how to get things done. Even illegitimate things. He almost smiled. My mother wanted the Paredes name to mean something good. Let's build that. It began pragmatically. Meetings in his penthouse office, spreadsheets alongside coffee mugs. Mia identified churches, community centers, and shelters. Roberto, through a labyrinth of legitimate shell companies and contacts who asked no questions, secured funding, warehouses, and logistics. Luca came by one afternoon, hovering in the doorway as Mia explained a distribution plan. Roberto saw his brother's gaze flick between them, seeing not just a project, but the spark of life returning to Roberto's eyes. You're really doing this, Luca said, his voice thick. She asked. Roberto replied simply, and for the first time in years, there was no resentment between them, only a shared, healing purpose. Mia saw the other world, though, the one that existed just outside the office door. Vicente reporting in low tones about boundary issues. The hardened men who stood guard, their eyes constantly scanning. The way Roberto's posture would shift, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm when dealing with that business. She didn't flinch from it. She understood that a man wasn't so easily divided. The protector's heart his mother described was also the enforcer's heart. One day, Levi came with Mia, his homework in tow. Roberto watched the boy from his desk, fascinated by his concentration, his quiet humming. Levi looked up, caught his eye, and held up his drawing, a fantastical spaceship. It's for the new Star Commander game, Levi explained, a hint of his shyness fading. Looks fast, Roberto said, rising to look closer. He pointed to a detail. Needs more shields here. The Zilog aliens always attack the port side first. Levi's eyes widened. You know Star Commander? I might have played a version or 2 in my time, Roberto said, a genuine, unguarded smile touching his lips for the first time in Mia's memory. Mia watched them, her heart doing a slow, painful twist. She saw the way Roberto leaned down, his large finger carefully tracing the ship's hull, his voice losing its lethal edge as he discussed alien tactics. She saw the way Levi looked at him, the wariness finally melting into captivated interest. Later, after Levi was engrossed in a game on the tablet, Mia stood with Roberto on the balcony. The city sprawled below them, a kingdom he ruled from the shadows. He's a good kid, Roberto said quietly.
He is.
He needs good men around him. Roberto heard the unspoken words. Asterisk, men who aren't feared. Men who come home for dinner. Asterisk, he looked at her, the wind tugging at her hair. I don't know how to be that, Mia. This, he gestured vaguely at the penthouse, the city. It's not a suit I can take off at the end of the day. I'm not asking you to, she said, turning to him. Her gaze was steady. I'm asking you to be who you are, but to choose every day to let the other parts breathe too. The parts your mother wrote to. The parts Levi sees when you talk about spaceship shields. He was silent for a long moment. When I read her letter, she said I should love again. She said she chose you for me to practice on. He let out a shaky breath, the vulnerability stark on his face. It's not practice, Mia. What I feel, it's terrifying. It's not a territory to be taken. It's a door opening, and I've spent so long in the dark. The light hurts. Tears filled her eyes. She took his hand, the one that had dealt so much violence, and held it between both of hers. Then we let it hurt. Together. Not as a mafia boss and a charity case. Just as Roberto and Mia. Two people who've been surviving, who are trying to remember how to live. He brought her hand to his lips, a kiss as soft as a prayer. I love you, he whispered against her skin, the words foreign and essential. I think I have since you put that envelope on the table and really saw me break apart. I love you too, she said, the admission feeling like stepping off a cliff. The man in the letter. The man who cried for his mother. The man who wants to feed a city for her. He pulled her into an embrace, holding her as if she were the only solid thing in a shifting world. Over her shoulder, through the glass, he saw Levi glance up from his game, see them, and offer a small, knowing smile before turning back to his screen. The week before Christmas became a whirlwind. The Paredes Family Christmas Fund, Mia's insisted upon name, launched in earnest. Roberto, using a mix of legitimate funds and strategic persuasion, secured a warehouse. Trucks arrived with food, coats, and toys. Mia organized an army of volunteers from her church and neighborhood. Roberto was there, not as a figurehead but working. He stacked boxes alongside retirees and college students. He listened as a young mother told Mia, with heartbreaking matter-of-factness, that the food hamper meant she could buy her daughter the shoes she needed for school. He saw the way people looked at him, first with fear, then with confusion, then with a dawning, cautious gratitude. He was unloading a case of canned goods when a frail, elderly man approached, leaning on a cane. You're Antonia's boy.
Roberto froze.
Yes, sir. The man's eyes were milky with cataracts, but sharp with memory. She talked about you all the time at the bodega. Said you had the best heart of any kid in Newark. He reached out a gnarled hand and patted Roberto's arm. She'd be so proud today. Roberto could only nod, a lump in his throat the size of a fist. On Christmas Eve morning, everything was ready. The distributions were set for the next day. The penthouse was silent, the work done. Roberto stood in the center of his living room, feeling the old emptiness threaten to return. Then his phone buzzed. A text from Mia. *, your mother's house. 1 hour. Bring clothes you don't mind getting dusty. *. Curiosity cut through the melancholy. He drove to the modest, neat house in the ironbound section, the house he'd paid off for her years ago and had been unable to enter since her death. Mia's Honda was out front. Luca's SUV was there too. He pushed open the front door, and the smell hit him first, lemon polish and old wood and memory. The furniture was sheeted, but in the living room, boxes were open. Luca and Vicente were hauling a large, familiar plastic container from the hall closet. Mia stood on a step stool, wiping dust from a framed picture of the Nativity. She looked over her shoulder, her face smudged but glowing. She said to reclaim Christmas. We start here. Levi ran up, holding a tangled string of lights. Mr. Roberto, look what we found. Roberto's heart hammered against his ribs. This was the epicenter of his grief, the place where every memory was a landmine. Luca walked over, holding a box labeled Zma's living room. His eyes were soft. She'd want the tree here, man. Not in some museum penthouse. Here, where the memories are. Roberto took a deep, shuddering breath. He looked at Mia, who offered a smile of unwavering support. He looked at Levi, vibrating with excited energy. He looked at his brother and his oldest friend, both waiting for his lead. Okay, he said, his voice thick. Let's bring it back. The next hours were a symphony of discovery and joy. They uncovered treasures, the hand-painted glass ornaments Roberto had made in kindergarten, the elegant ones from his parents' first Christmas together, the silly, felt reindeer with googly eyes. They strung lights along the banister, just as she had. They set up the nativity scene on the mantel, arranging the figures with a care that felt like a sacrament. Finally, the tree, a fragrant fir Vicente had secured, stood bare in the corner by the window. Mia brought out the final box. The ornaments. They hung them together, story by story. This one, Luca laughed, holding a lopsided clay star. You made this when you were 7. You were so mad it was lopsided. Roberto took it, the weight of it in his palm profound. She said it was perfect because I made it. Levi carefully hung a delicate bird with a chipped wing. She must have really loved birds, he said seriously. She loved all beautiful, fragile things, Roberto said, his eyes finding Mia's. When the tree was nearly full, Mia handed him a small, flat box. This was separate, with a letter. Roberto opened it. Inside, nestled in yellowing tissue paper, was the tree topper. A simple, tarnished gold star, one of its points slightly bent. It was the star from his childhood, from every tree until the year she got too sick to decorate. His breath caught. He took it out, the metal cool in his hand. Without a word, he fetched the ladder. The room fell silent as he climbed. At the top, eye level with the star he was about to place, he looked out over the room, at his brother, at his friend, at the woman he loved and her son, all illuminated in the soft, multicolored glow of the lights. He looked up, through the ceiling, through the cold night sky, and whispered, "This one's for you, Mama. We're living. Finally living." He placed the star. It settled into place, the bent point giving it a character all its own. Levi plugged in the lights. The tree erupted in a blaze of color, reflecting in the windows, filling the room with a warmth that had been absent for 2 decades. It was the most beautiful thing Roberto had ever seen. Mia came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his. Levi leaned against his other side. Luca put an arm around his shoulders. They stood that way for a long time, a new family forged from loss and love, gathered in the light of a reclaimed promise. On Christmas morning, they stood together at the distribution warehouse. Roberto, no longer in a suit but in jeans and a sweater, handed a food hamper to a young father holding a toddler. The man's eyes, tired but grateful, met his. "Thank you. The Paredes Fund, right? God bless you." "Merry Christmas," Roberto said, the words feeling true on his tongue for the first time in 20 years. He turned and saw Mia across the room, helping an elderly woman try on a coat. Levi was showing a group of kids the toy section, his face alight with sharing the joy. Luca and Vicente were directing traffic, their usual stern expressions softened by the season. The Mafia boss who had been tricked into a blind date had found his way to his knees, shattered by a mother's love from beyond the grave. And the single mom, carrying a promise like a sacred torch, had shown him that from the broken pieces, something stronger and more beautiful could be built. Some men are saved by power, others by mercy. Roberto Paredves was saved by a letter, a promise, and the courageous, enduring love of 2 women, one who never stopped believing in him and one who taught him how to believe again. The greatest act of honoring the dead is refusing to join them while you are still breathing. This Christmas, Roberto Paredves chose to breathe. He chose to live. He chose to love. And in doing so, he finally came home. If this story reminded you that no heart is too hard to soften, no winter too dark for a new dawn, then do us a favor. Smash that like button. Let it be your promise to choose light, even on the hardest days. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because everyone deserves a second chance, and we bring stories that remind you why. Share this with someone who might need to hear it, the friend carrying a silent grief, the family member who's forgotten how to hope, or anyone who believes their story is over. Remind them it's only a chapter. This is more than a story. It's an invitation to live fully, to love boldly, to honor those we've lost by refusing to disappear with them. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing in redemption. And remember, wherever you are, whatever you're facing, your comeback story is waiting to be written. Merry Christmas, and may your new year be filled with light. Until next time.